Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our August meeting of the David's Hope and the Arizona Mental Health Criminal Justice Coalition. I know we have a number of guests that are going to be joining us, so I'd like to delay moving forward with too much for the first couple of minutes. We had quite a number of registrants for today's meeting. We're extremely honored to have Dr. Norman Ornstein here with us today. And I'm not looking at the pictures right now, but I know you said Jessica Berenson is on the call too.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for being here. We are.
I'm going to close my door so that the vacuum doesn't.
Okay, sure.
Hope that doesn't affect the internet connection, but I don't think it will. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yes, we're hearing real well.
Okay.
So our meetings, many folks here that'll be with us today have been attending our meetings for a number of years. Our coalition actually started back in 2012. Well, we took the leadership of the coalition in 2012. It was actually started by Maricopa County Adult Probation and the Regional Behavioral Health Authority in Maricopa County, back in about 2009. And we've been plodding along. We have quite a network of folks, but being a grassroots organization, it's really challenging to bring together the stakeholders that are required to be working together to bring systemic change. So I just wanted to give that bit of a background, and we're going to have some report outs from a couple of our normal folks that. Especially law enforcement really today is what we're going to narrow it down to, and I'll do that quickly here at the start of the meeting. And I want to say that law enforcement truly has been the driving force here that's helped us accomplish what we've accomplished. Mm-hmm. It's pretty, even back to our own beginnings, it was probation officers oftentimes rather than mental health professionals that would help us see people get the treatment that they needed. So that is what this coalition is about. It's about bringing criminal justice and mental health stakeholders together to accomplish our common goals of reducing incarceration of people with mental illness and addiction. I want to remind everyone that this meeting, as we had said, is being recorded and will be available on YouTube later. So thank you, Dr. Ornstein, for giving us your okay with that.
Sure.
We are in the process of some change here, as I guess the whole country is really all the time. It's hard to, I don't know how you folks do it around Washington. It's hard for me to keep up with what's going on down in Phoenix. But I want to make sure that before we begin, we mention that the way that Dr. Ornstein and I had connected was through Jessica Berenson, who is his executive director there. She's actually a medical doctor that is working in this field or chosen field rather than in a hospital somewhere, I guess. But Dr. Ornstein had a tragic loss of his son, Matthew, back in January 2015. And Matthew had mental illness and challenges that we'll have him discuss and explain later. But the foundation that he started, the Matthew Ornstein Memorial Foundation, is really, you're fairly new retrospectively. You've been around since about 2015 then, but it's amazing what you've accomplished. And and so natural that you connected with Judge Stephen Leifman. You know, he's been the leader across the country and really internationally in seeing the numbers of people with mental illness in jail being reduced. And it was just so natural that you connected with them in a fashion that now is so dramatically going to affect us all with your creation of the documentary Definition of Insanity. So many of us had seen the documentary, but many folks had not. And your efforts to bring this out, bring the documentary out and available to folks that haven't been exposed to it yet, and to see the common sense approaches that are being taken there as the Stepping Up initiative unfolds throughout the nation is just tremendous. So I can't thank you enough personally and from all of us here at the coalition, because the only with the active participation of the stakeholders that are in the position to bring about change can we really make a difference for those individuals in our jails and prisons, or keep our people out of our jails and prisons, and to help folks on the road to recovery rather than incarceration. So decriminalizing mental illness, that's what we talk about a lot, and the folks here that have been important contributors to our coalition and family members, I know that's their goal as well. So it's great to have so many partners here in Arizona and across the nation. I'm going to jump over to a couple of our law enforcement folks. I know there's a big CIT training going on in the East Valley down in Mesa this week, so a lot of our regular folks aren't here, but and Benny Pena is I don't know if Benny got on the line. Benny's been a long time partner of our coalition. He was recently chosen to be the police chief in the city of Surprise. He had been deputy chief in the city of Peoria. And Chief Pena, are you here yet? I know he was double booked and he was going to try to make it. So, but we just again want to congratulate him that he's now chief in city of Surprise, and that's good news for everybody. He's a dedicated advocate that truly cares about those that are disenfranchised. So Chief Pena, if you do jump in the next couple of minutes, feel free to let me know. Lisa Scott, who is from Peoria Police Department, who had worked with Chief Pena for so many years. Lisa, are you here? I think I saw you and you were going to give us a brief update from Peoria.
I am here. Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. So we had lots of changes with our unit in our department. As you just heard, we lost our deputy chief, who's now chief in Surprise, and congrats to him. We miss him, but that's good for Surprise. I have a new sergeant now, so we're going to have a new supervisor over our unit. Our unit is a CIT, homeless outreach, and misdemeanor repeat offender program unit. So we'll have a new sergeant. He's going to be Sergeant Aponte and should be starting with us hopefully soon. He's kind of doing double duty right now. And we're expanding our team. We're going from 2 of us to now 3 of us and a supervisor. We're just not sure when we're getting that third body over, but he was #1 on our testing process. His name is Andrew Marks, and Andy will be coming to us soon too. So hopefully we'll be able to do even more things because we'll have a little bit extra assistance. So we're pretty excited about that. We've been needing somebody else for this team for quite some time. And as of right now, that's the only updates we have.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate that so much. And I wanted to just report on the work that's going on with Scottsdale Police Department. I had gotten an update. They're, of course, working in the CIT 40-hour training this week, but from Tracy Wilkinson reports that the East Valley CIT Scottsdale Police Department now has crisis response team of 4 detectives and a sergeant. And they're going to be operating similarly to Mesa PD with mental health pickup orders being a priority. So we appreciate the continued participation from our East Valley folks and their continuous CIT trainings that are always going on. I know we have Sabrina Taylor with us, who is, I know, Sabrina, we hadn't planned for you to share necessarily, but I can't resist seeing your smiling face. Sabrina Taylor is the CIT coordinator from Phoenix PD. What a job that is. And she has been working studiously to plan the CIT International Conference, which is happening next week. And Sabrina, what do you think of, I was thinking of announcing about our law enforcement executive of the year today at this meeting. You think that'd be appropriate?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. We changed years ago from keeping it a secret because, you know, you might as well just tell the world. So no, it's great. And I honestly can't wait for next week to be over, but I'm excited.
Well, thank you, Sabrina. And so what I'm referring to is that our very own Yavapai County Sheriff, David Rhodes, has been selected from, how many were there, Sabrina, that were, you remember? There were, I was trying to remember.
There were a couple, but for awards, there were, you know, hundreds of submissions.
Yeah.
As you break them down by category, it gets a little bit better, but there was some stiff competition.
Hundreds, yes. And our very own sheriff from Yavapai County, David Rhodes, has been selected as the law enforcement executive of the year to be honored next week at CIT International. And there were a lot of us that were rooting for that. And Sabrina helped cheerlead that effort. And I thank you for that. And we couldn't be happier and more proud of of all of you in law enforcement here that have worked so closely with us at the coalition, and of Sheriff Rhodes' accomplishments. Thank you, Sabrina.
Oh, my pleasure. Oh, and Mary Lou, I think I sent you an email earlier, but I just got information from the Department of Justice about the investigation into Phoenix Police, and there is available email or a portal for public comment. So they had a public meeting Monday to discuss it, but you know, it was limited. So if anybody wants to make comments, I emailed you the links. So one is phoenix.community@usdoj.gov, and the other portal is civilrights.justice.gov.
Okay, great. That's important. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll work to get that out there. All right, and I think we're ready to, well, no, we're going to do a little quick poll first. So let me go ahead and do that quickly. This is, as you're used to these, but I want to get, some of these are really just your the way you see our coalition. So they're really no right or wrong answers to these questions. We talk in our poll a lot about the Stepping Up initiative and our past polls. And I have a few questions today. One is I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. One is our familiar question that you always see is your relationship to a person living with a mental illness or addiction is. Are you a peer or family member, a professional, or both? And our second question is, in your view, I'm going to add that the Arizona Mental Health Criminal Justice Coalition has broad participation from county leaders across Arizona. Are you happy with that, or would you like to see more involvement? I guess is what we're trying to get at, and what your perception is. And our third question is, question is, I would like to have more opportunities to be involved in building participation in this coalition by Arizona's mental health, criminal justice stakeholders. So would you like to be more actively involved in helping us build the work of stepping up in your region? Do you feel like you're on overload and you wouldn't want to do another thing? Or do you feel like your involvement right now is just about right? So we're seeing those answers come in. Thank you for that. We have 28% of people are peers or family members, and 59% are both professionals and peer family members, 10% professional only. And how do you feel about the broad participation? Gee, you guys have a lot of confidence in our coalition. 65% are giving us a positive that we do have broad participation. 31% not sure. And that's understandable. And then our last question, would you like to have an opportunity to be more involved in building participation in your in the coalition? And 34% of you say yes, you would like to seek out more opportunities to be involved in your region, and 63% of you are feeling just about right. So I know many of you are very busy full-time doing the work of stepping up in your region. So I'm going to end that. And okay. So thank you for your patience with that. We're going to try to X out of this screen. There we go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Dr. Ornstein, but I have to do some introduction. So I'm going to sort it through my 5 pages here of what I think seems to be important to say about Norman Ornstein. So I'm going to do some reading, so I apologize for that. But Norman Ornstein is an American political scientist and resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, a Washington, D.C. conservative think tank. He's co-author of so many books, author and co-author, that they're hard to name. I also was doing some research and saw that they had described you as a child prodigy. So I thought that was interesting, graduating high school when you're 14 and college at 18. So so that has to be something that I can imagine was interesting when you read that about yourself, I would imagine. He is a frequent contributor to so many television news programs, and you'll see him all the time across on national TV. He's it's telling me that your political party is a Democrat, but this organization that you represent is a conservative organization, and you have been so respected by members across the aisle for so many years that it's hard for me to fathom how you keep up on so many things that you keep up on in foreign policy, national policy. You were Dr. Ornstein was helped create the McCain-Feingold Act, and I can imagine how much other legislation that you've been a part of. So I just have to read a few of the names of the books that, if you haven't read them yet, I encourage you to get. Some of his more recent books, titled The Broken Branch, How Congress is Failing America and How to Get It Back on Track. That was in 2008. In 2012, It's Even Worse Than It Looks, How the American Constitutional System Collided with the New Politics of Extremism. And in 2017, One Nation After Trump, A Guide for the Perplexed, the Disillusioned, the Desperate, and the Not Yet Deported. So that has to bring a chuckle to everyone when you think of what we've all been through. But most importantly, what brought us together is the tragic loss of Dr. Ornstein and his wife Judith's son Matthew. And the Matthew Ornstein Memorial Foundation is the goals here that I'm looking at, that I'll see if this sounds to be accurate for you. We have the promotion of high school debate, and especially in less privileged communities, as a way of encouraging scholarship, fellowship, and citizenship, of developing academic and life skills in middle school and high school, and of providing equality of opportunity in higher education and eventually in careers. And civic discourse, basically, I mean, when that's so what we need to be able to have across the nation. And helping those suffer from serious brain diseases and their loved ones through the promotion of research and education to better understand and develop improved treatments for those diseases, and to work towards the elimination of stigma associated with them. So those are the best described, I think, the mission of the Memorial Foundation. And again, I'm just going to introduce Dr. Ornstein, and we're anxious to get to know you. Welcome to our Arizona Mental Health Criminal Justice Coalition.
Thank you, Mary Lou, and thank you all for what you're doing, vital work. I am really delighted and honored to be joined here by Jess Berenson, whom you had mentioned earlier. Jess is the executive director of our foundation, and she knew Matthew. Both were debaters. Matthew, a few years ahead of Jess, and was actually a mentor to her in the debate area. And Jess also knew our younger son, Danny, in high school. And as a very accomplished physician, somebody who has immersed herself in the challenges that we face in the system dealing with mental health and mental illness, but also with debate. I would note that we have now done, since 2015, 7 of these summer debate institutes. We just finished the 7th. It was over 160 kids from rising 6th graders through high school, almost all Title I schools from the Washington, D.C. area. The subject this year, this is policy debate. There's one topic for the year, is one of vital interest to Arizona. It is water. And we faced a challenge this year because of COVID. We had started out doing half virtual and half in person in a public charter school here in the district. And then one of our instructors, fully vaccinated, came down with a breakthrough case of COVID, and we had to, in midstream, cancel the in-person and scramble. So I would just, as an aside, urge everybody to get vaccinated, get everybody around you vaccinated, wear your masks so we can keep those things from disrupting our lives down the road. But that's just a little aside public service announcement. So just a little bit about the background and history here. As Mary Lou said, I'm a political scientist whose main focus throughout my career has been on American politics and governance. During that time, I've worked very closely with a lot of representatives from Arizona, including a deep relationship and friendship with John McCain, with others from both parties. And I, as with so many, I probably wouldn't be here speaking to you today if it hadn't been for the experience of my son. I wouldn't be as deeply immersed in these battles or these attempts to change a very broken system. But when you're touched personally, it's when you realize how difficult and how broken the system is. So our son was a national champion high school debater, a brilliant young man who had more friends than anybody I've ever known. Friends from childhood, friends from high school, friends from debate. He went on to Princeton. His debate experience was his entree there. And then he went to Hollywood. And he was having some success when at age 24, he had a psychotic break. During that period of life, really from 16, 17 up through 25, 26, when we know people are most susceptible to psychosis. It's when the prefrontal cortex is developing, and stress, along with many other factors, can contribute to it. And Matthew believed, and this is also not uncommon, that God had come and taken his soul, but not his body. He wasn't really sure why, but he went on a 10-year struggle to try and recapture his soul and gain favor of God, became more religious. Religious ideations are so common here. But he also had one part of the brain disease that comes so frequently with those with serious mental illness, anosognosia. So he did not believe he was ill. He actually thought that mental illness was a societal construct to keep behavior inside a narrow band. But he also thought that if he somehow took medication, even for all the pain he was going through, and in part because he just didn't understand why this had happened to him, he had deep depression, clinical depression, along with his psychosis. He acknowledged that, but thought that if he took any medication to deal with that pain, that it would not look well in the eyes of God, that he needed to do this on his own. And so he went through 10 years fundamentally without getting any treatment or medication. I found one doctor, an absolute saint, not easy to find among psychiatrists, a man named Wayne Fenton, who had a full-time job at the National Institutes of Mental Health, who would come to our house. Matthew left California, moved back home, and almost didn't leave his bed for a very long period of time. And Dr. Fenton would come to our house at 9 or 10 at night, go upstairs even when Matthew said, "I'm not seeing anybody," and sit and talk to him for a couple of hours at a time. And then probably 6 or 9 months into what at least was a relationship, and we know that talk therapy can help oftentimes, Dr. Fenton got murdered by a patient, not even one of his own, somebody who'd been referred to him because he took on the toughest cases. And that was another setback for us. Anyhow, Matthew went through a struggle, a system that wouldn't give any information or help to family members. Some of you know this firsthand, because he was over 18 and he had presumed agency over his own life. There were a couple of times when he ended up hospitalized, and the hospital wouldn't even tell us that he was there, misusing actually HIPAA for their own protection. Almost no help anywhere. Finally, after being basically forced out of several places where he was living, condominiums that didn't like the fact, among other things, that he smoked heavily, as so many people with serious mental illness do. We know that there is something in the nicotine that provides some soothing effect. But we live in a society now where the stigma of serious mental illness gets amplified by the stigma against smoking. And so finally, he ended up in a motel in Newark, Delaware, a college town, with a smoking room where he actually felt a little bit more free because he could come and go as he wished and nobody bothered him. But he ended up dying of carbon monoxide poisoning accidentally inside that room at age 34, after this 10 years of immense and unknowable pain for him, and great pain for his family. When that happened, we knew that there were two paths that could be taken. One is We could just curl up into the corner and be almost catatonic in our grief. Or we could, to use a phrase that Joe Biden has used many times, try to turn grief to purpose. Something that Mary Lou knows, that many of you know, a way of trying to find your way out of the darkness. And so we created this foundation in his memory. My wife, Judy Harris, and I, our son, Danny, and other family members. And we decided after some careful deliberation to follow these two tracks, to do one thing that would absolutely thrill him, and that is to teach these incredible life skills of debate to people, to allow them to fulfill their potential. And I would just note as an aside that we have kids who've been through this program now who are at schools like Harvard and Wake Forest and Princeton. Jess arranges at our debate camp a college fair. Top schools from everywhere just come flocking because they know that these kids who have excelled at debate are going to come to college with an enormous advantage, and they're not going to be intimidated, and they're going to know how to do research, how to talk, how to organize, how to make a case. So Matthew would be thrilled. He wouldn't be very thrilled that we are working in the area of mental illness, but we decided that we would do what we could to try and keep other families from going through what we had to go through, and other people who suffer from these brain diseases. I don't like to call them mental illnesses because we had the experience that is also very common with some of our dear friends, highly educated people who would say to us as they saw Matthew struggling, why don't you just kick him in the ass? As if this is something that he had control over, that he was just being lazy or not having discipline. We know that it's a brain disease, and the brain is an organ just like any other organ. And it's not like if somebody has lung cancer or pancreatic cancer, we would say to them, why don't you just suck it up and get it taken care of? That's not how organ illnesses work. But we wanted to find ways out of this morass and see if we could change the system and provide help for others. Now, along the way, even though Matthew did not really have significant encounters with the criminal justice system, he was just lucky that way. I will tell you that he did have one once. He was on a what I think must have been a manic episode, got in his car and drove back to New Jersey towards Princeton, but drove for what was probably 36 hours straight. And early, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the police in New Jersey stopped him because somebody else who was driving saw that he was weaving in the car. And he was, from what I can gather, pretty belligerent to the police officers, said he was just listening to music and kind of moving with the music. We were fortunate that these were police officers who understood that he was suffering from a brain disease and called in a mental health professional, and he ended up in a hospital. Now, in that hospital, they had no beds, and he had to wait basically on a gurney for days before they could find a place for him, in the hallway. And there were a lot of others who were in that circumstance. And again, that was a hospital that wouldn't tell us that he was there. So he was fortunate that he wasn't tased or shot or arrested, but he also suffered through what we know are many of the other ills in this system. And we know that when police officers or law enforcement people often try to do the right thing, they can't. You can maybe find a bed or find an opening in an emergency room, but then if you're a police officer, you're probably gonna have to wait there for hours to fill out the paperwork and get all of that done. And there are no beds, in part because we don't allow the beds in community mental health centers. We don't provide the support for them. So we saw all of that. We saw the fact that he could be, he could block treatment because he was over 18. And of course, at times when he needed to, he could present himself as just terrific, perfectly normal, as a self-preservation, which didn't take away from the fact that he suffered seriously from this. Anyhow, a few months after Matthew died, I was approached by a number of members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, who were trying to put together what became the first serious federal effort to deal with serious mental illness, the 21st Century's Cures Act in the end, and it was foundering in Congress, and people I knew who knew about Matthew asked if I could help out. And I wrote a piece in the New York Times, painful piece, telling our story and also urging movement on this. And right around that time, Judge Steve Leifman was given this remarkable award called the Rehnquist Award by state and local judges, the Association of State and Local Judges around the country, for the best state and local judge. And they had a panel presentation before the ceremony at the Supreme Court. And he had seen my piece, and I knew about him because my wife and I had seen him at a Kennedy Forum before this in Boston, and were blown away by what he had been able to accomplish. It turns out that his mother was there at this presentation, and his family had roots in Minnesota, as I did, and I bonded with his mother before I bonded with him. But we did bond. And then Judy and I went down to Miami and spent some days immersed in his program, and were blown away by what he had accomplished, developed a relationship with him that's turned into a very deep friendship and partnership. But what struck me in the aftermath of that is, as I got responses from my Times article, was how few people in places around the country were aware of the innovations in Miami-Dade, how even the Stepping Up initiative, with its remarkable reach, still has not taught best practices or had them implemented in many, many places. And we decided that the best thing we could do was use the power of film. And so we enlisted the help of very talented filmmakers who had actually gone to the same high school as Matthew and knew him, who had done another documentary on a case involving a tragedy and serious mental illness and prisons in Florida, and did this documentary, The Definition of Insanity, and thought that we could use it as a springboard. Not only have it broadcast as it was on public television, but then take it and use it as a catalyst around the country. We premiered it at the Miami Film Festival in March of 2020, just as COVID exploded. Actually, we had a screening that was sold out, and then the next day they did another one, and they stopped the film festival at that point and said, we have to cancel the rest of it, go home. And we did, and our plans to take this physically around the country were foiled. We've been doing remote Zoom and other meetings in different places, and we're finally just beginning to work to step outside and do something more. Judge Leifman and I, along with Tom Insel, a brilliant doctor, a former head of NIMH, are going to be at Chautauqua in upstate New York this coming week. And we will do a program there. And we're going to be doing a program, we hope, unless Delta or other variants intervene, in the fall in Minneapolis. And we're going to start to venture out more, and of course hope at some point that we will come to Phoenix. You know certainly a fair amount about Judge Leifman's program. You know that he started it almost 24 years ago when he first became a judge, as he encountered firsthand the reality of a system that was broken. And he has been a transformational figure. You are fortunate to have the expanded CIT training in There are a couple of things that I would mention about it in Miami-Dade, though. They've now trained over 7,600 police officers in this 40-hour program. And two things have emerged from it. One is that over time, they haven't just trained the police officers, they've changed the culture of their police department. And that's an absolutely critical element. Now, if you escalate conflict in Miami-Dade, you are viewed with disdain by the other officers. You've taken the easy way out. If you get out of a conflict or a potential conflict by de-escalating, so nobody gets hurt, neither the police officer nor the person who is the subject of the encounter or others around, you're the hero. You're the one who did it the right way. And it is really important that the training go beyond just training. And we know that we've seen many incidents. First of all, of course, we have many incidents where people are sent, unfortunately, to crisis situations with somebody having an episode of mental illness who are not trained, even though there are trained officers and others around. One of the things Judge Leifman has done is, and in their program, is they've trained the 911 responders to make sure that the right teams of people go out. But the other is that sometimes even those who have been trained still revert back to escalation. And we know as well from studies that have been done that oftentimes these tragic incidents and escalations occur in the same day that a law enforcement person has had an earlier crisis of one sort or another, where the tension level goes up and the cortisol surges to the brain and the response doesn't necessarily fit. So one of the things that they're doing now is trying to make sure that if somebody has one of those, and it can be an encounter of domestic violence or something involving force, or it can just be something where there's an enormous amount of tension, is that you move people off of potential calls for the rest of the day, and it can make a big difference. But the second and very important element here is that the crisis intervention coordinator in Miami-Dade, this wonderful woman, is herself getting 150 calls on average a week from police officers to discuss their own mental health issues. We know that PTSD is common. It's common first, of course, because many law enforcement people have been veterans and they may have encountered it in their service. But it also happens on a regular basis if you're out there in the line of fire. We know that more police officers die by suicide every year than in the line of duty. And we know that in many departments, if you admit that you have issues, you're going to be ridiculed or you'll be taken off the beat and put on a desk job. And they're now getting treatment because they see that this is not something to be ashamed of. It is something that happens when you are in a position like this. And if you can deal with it and get the treatment, then you're going to be better. You'll be a better person. You'll be a better husband or father or mother, or just a better officer as well. And they're getting this treatment outside the police department, which has made a real difference. That doesn't mean that they're perfect, but what we do know is that in Miami-Dade, the 7th most populous county in America with an enormous instance of serious mental illness and of course the dual diagnosis that often comes with it, they've cut the number of arrests in half, enough that they've been able to close a jail and save $12 million a year over now almost 8 years for the county. They've cut the number of deaths in encounters with police officers from a couple every month to 1 or 2 over the last 6 or 7 years. That the city of Miami, as a consequence of that, because there are so many fewer wrongful death and wrongful assault suits, was able to improve its bond rating. And of course, their pretrial diversion program, which is not just a mental health court, but a situation where they provide wraparound services and housing for people coming through. We know that assisted outpatient treatment, for example, can work, but it's not going to work if you take somebody and somebody comes by once a week and says, have you taken your meds? You've got to have that support, including the peer support that comes with it. And the initial investment pays off enormously. And so we've now seen what difference this can make, saving lives and saving money. We know that it doesn't work as Lifeman has constructed it everywhere. Every community has its own culture, its own challenges, its own resources. But what we do know is that we can make a difference. We can change the system for the better. We can make it better for law enforcement, even as we make it better for people with mental illness. And what we also know, and finally, is that in this era, where after George Floyd, we know that reforming police departments, reforming the criminal justice system, reforming the system on mental illness, which includes making sure that we have a focus on serious mental illness and the resources connected to it, the beds available for crisis situations, but also the ability to have these services and wraparound services, that the benefits extend well beyond just simply those with serious mental illness. You can make changes that result in fewer arrests and violent encounters, even for those who don't have a serious mental illness, that you can save police officers' lives and make them better, even as you save the lives of others, that you can move beyond the simple rhetoric of defund the police and move to partnerships where you can make reforms for the better that will work for all. It's not easy to do. It takes transformational leaders. It takes community involvement. It takes resources, but those resources pay off big time over time. So with that, let me stop, and I'm happy to have some dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Ornstein. Gee, that you did a tremendous job of explaining to us what you're about, what your organization is bound and determined to do, and the really, to me, really intriguing double purpose that you have in the foundation of creating these confident youth that can go out into the world and succeed and eloquently express their opinions. It's so it's sort of a missing link, isn't it? To be able to have civic discourse that that makes sense and that entices people, draws them in rather than pushes them out. So I'm seeing, I'm going to invite folks, I didn't mention earlier, but I invite you to put questions or comments in the chat, and we will address those. And I see Jessica Berenson's letting us know about on August 15th, okay, NADCP on 8/15, there'll be a screening in the morning. So I don't know how many of us that are on the call have seen the definition of insanity. It's been out there, and we've put it out several times when it first came out, and we're hoping to, well, we're planning along with Dr. Ornstein to be able to have a screening of the documentary with a work group that our Prosecutors Association is putting together, that's going to be working on diversion. So some of those that are part of our coalition have been working on helping plan that, and we're anxiously waiting for that to happen. We have one item that I know I had mentioned to you, Dr. Ornstein, when we talked before, you're right that our Arizona law enforcement, that we're fortunate regarding our very committed Arizona law enforcement to train officers, and that they're seeking facilities for crisis care just as much as the public is. The officers we see them so often heartbroken when they see the tragic results when people are landed in jail rather than at a hospital. I had mentioned to you one of the frustrations problems that I'd been working on, and really it was years before I'd been doing this work before I realized what was really happening to our folks. But when someone does end up in jail or with criminal charges, our Arizona laws don't allow the evidence of a mental disorder to be used in their criminal defense unless they're pleading insanity. So, we've got law enforcement doing the right thing. We've got so much happening that, that's headed the right direction. But yet when we hit those courts, we're still hitting concrete walls that are sending people to long prison sentences. And we still see in our legislature folks that really want to take one side of, it looks like my smoke alarm's going to start going off. Isn't that something? I'm going to have to call for help in a minute. But the battery is going to start going off is what I mean. But I know you had expressed some interesting perspective on that. And I was curious if you hear much talk about this around the country. So I know we want to prevent charges from getting filed. We want to prevent people from getting taken to the hospital. But when they do, in the courts, are you seeing movement that is as exciting as what you're seeing on the ground with advocacy and with the law enforcement work that's going on?
Yes, actually, and it's very heartening. And this is something that is a real passion of Steve Leifman's. He's connected with the Association of Chief Justices from all the states and is finding terrific enthusiasm there. We did a program showing the film and a conversation with the Chief Justice in Illinois, and there was a lot of interest. The state and local judges, the association has been very much involved, and we are finding, there's always going to be a range of viewpoints of judges. It's always going to be difficult to make sure that judges have some awareness of the nature of mental illness. And I know, I'll just tell you as an aside, one of the things, my wife, who's a lawyer, started to do some pro bono work to help people with serious mental illness who had been denied benefits. And, if you have, it's hard enough for even the most accomplished among us oftentimes to fill out the forms to get Social Security or Medicare assistance. And if you have a mental illness, it's much more difficult. So she was helping a woman with schizophrenia who had ended up losing her home and was homeless to get help, but also helping a grandmother with a young child who had witnessed her mother's or his mother's murder by his father, and who was in very bad shape, but get some help. And when this little child came to court, the child, who had terrible behavioral problems, was dressed with a sport coat and a tie and was completely polite. And despite having a file this thick about the issues with this child, the judge said, "Well, you seem perfectly fine to me." And that's just an ignorance about the nature of mental illness and the fact that people can present themselves in a way that doesn't reflect the record. So it's not just getting mental health courts. It's not just getting people understanding some of these things, it goes deeper than that. One of the other problems we have, and we're starting, I think, to see this with, I think, very heartening work on criminal justice reform, is, as I mentioned earlier, and as we all know, if you find somebody who has a serious mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, whatever it might be, the odds that they are self-medicating are very, very high. And we've had draconian drug laws with mandatory minimum sentences. And of course, an awful lot of the people who are stuck in our prisons, who get put in solitary confinement, who have their situations worsened, who don't get any treatment, or who end up sometimes getting terrible treatment, are there because of these laws. We're going to see some changes in those laws. One of the best things that happened in Miami-Dade was the pretrial diversion program started with misdemeanors, but then moved to nonviolent felonies. And so they're able to help people who may get brought up on drug charges, but knowing that they have a mental illness, they can get help and not have to go through the prison system. And getting judges who are sensitive to these things, who have an understanding that it can be better, becomes extremely important. But it's just as important that we get prosecutors understanding that it's better if you can get people treatment rather than have them cycle through the system just because you can get one more trophy that you've convicted somebody isn't going to help more broadly. And one of the great triumphs in Miami-Dade, if you've seen the film, you will see it. The state's attorney there, who's a real hard ass, bought into this program, and all of the prosecutors there have as well. And of course, you also need defense attorneys who understand that getting treatment might be better than just getting somebody off to go back out onto the streets to get arrested again or to die on the streets from heat exposure, freezing, or being beaten by somebody. So we need changes from top to bottom, but I think one of the most heartening is that it's coming through the judges.
Thank you. I'm glad we're recording. I'm really apologize about, you're going to hear some chirping until I can get someone in here to turn my battery for the smoke alarm. Suzanne Rabideau, would you mind just go ahead and jumping in? You have a great question and comment here in the chat. Would you mind just go ahead and jumping in and asking that verbally to Dr. Ornstein?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you so much for your kind words and your work that you're doing for so many. We all know that the nation is moving forward with the implementation of a 988 crisis line number. And there's lots of discussion, lots of work happening in every state. Some states are moving forward with legislation to implement a cell phone taxation to support the implementation of the call line. Some states are even expanding that to be broader, to have those dollars address both the call center, crisis mobile, walk-in facilities, et cetera. I'm interested if you have any thoughts about what communities can be doing to really push that forward, and also thinking about what about commercial health plans? What are the roles of commercial health plans to address crisis needs?
Just excellent questions. We've had a universal service fund for a long time, since the Telecommunications Act of 1998, where there's a bit of a tax on your phone to pay for expanding to get universal service. I think having what would be a pretty small fee to expand these services, and I agree with you. A simple crisis hotline is really important, and it's wonderful. And a suicide prevention hotline with people who know how to talk to people and communicate, that's great. But we need more than that. We need to have a follow-up. We need to have those services more broadly available. This all has to be integrated together. And that's one of our problems, is that so many of these things are siloed. And I'm hoping, one of the things that I'm trying to get done, we're going to probably end up seeing this gigantic infrastructure plan that will follow on the large infrastructure plan that just passed the Senate
Yes.
occur over the next several weeks. And I'm hoping that along, they're focusing on human infrastructure, and that includes family leave and childcare and other kinds of supports that are so vital. But we need mental health infrastructure, and that includes providing resources for more of these services so that people can get the treatment that they need. We have a lot of work to do as well with the health insurers. I'm fortunate that I know some of the people at Kaiser Permanente, which has always been a very forward-looking health plan, and we're going to be taking the film and working with them in some cities in the West, and hopefully with more than that. But it's not just doing that. It's also educating insurers to understand that they too can probably, over the long run, save a lot of money if they work with people to improve their lot, get them the treatment that they need so that they're not coming back over and over again. And of course, we also have a lot of work to do to, even if we get, I've talked to Patrick Kennedy many times, and he deserves enormous kudos, as others do, for getting parity. But parity is a pretty shallow thing when you look at the reality on the ground. If you have a health plan that says, yes, we provide parity, if you go to see a mental health professional, we'll pay for it, but we have one mental health professional in our entire area who is on the plan. And yeah, if you're in a crisis, you can probably get in to see him or her in 3 months. Well, that's not very helpful. So we need to find better ways of getting that help. And one of the ways in which we need to do that is to really beef up the community health centers and add more personnel. We need to have more incentives to get people trained in mental health and available for crisis situations. And we need to remove, I believe, the ridiculous IMD exclusion so that we can get Medicaid to provide the help to get those beds for people who are in crisis. But obviously, it's not just getting them through a crisis. It's getting the support and structure after that to help people regain their lives and recapture their lives that were taken away, not because of willful acts, but because they have a disease of an organ that's simply no different than if you came down with cancer or heart disease.
Thank you, Dr. Ornstein. I really appreciate, and when we first started doing this work, and, I had gotten into this work because of my son who was arrested due to his illness. And to me, it was just like, but don't they understand this is a brain disease? This is not criminal activity. This is a brain disease. And I really need to get back to more using that terminology again. And you just can't reinforce that enough. So in our justice system, and I think part of the anti-stigma is about doing just that, helping people understand that this is a brain disease, not a volitional choice that someone's going to behave in a bizarre manner. So thank you for bringing that back to our attention. I was going to ask, we have so many wonderful folks here that have been partnered with us for such a long time. And as I'm looking through our participants, I hate to put people on the spot, but I wondered, Gina Godby here, are you on the line still that you'd be available to share a little bit?
I am. Hello.
As a prosecutor, introduce yourself a little bit. And she's done so much tremendous work with the juveniles all across our state. And do you mind sharing a little bit and introducing yourself to Dr. Ornstein? And I bet you've got things going around in your mind. And I know that you're working on mental health court out there in your region. So
I am. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Gina Godby here. I've been a prosecutor for 25 years. I was laughing when you said hard-headed prosecutor, because some people might describe me as that too. But I've also seen the value in diversion programs from early on in my career. I started out in the juvenile court where we developed the first juvenile drug court. We also helped team up to develop the juvenile online transfer program for our young for our juveniles that were transferred to adult courts and our young adults, to help them kind of have more support like the juvenile court offered in the adult system. But I've tried every type of case on through homicides and other cases, and I've always learned, reviewing especially our capital diversion programs and our sentencing memorandums, that oftentimes there's warning signs that show behavior that could be predictive if we had just intervened early and gotten help. And it's sad because now we're here in the worst scenario where somebody is sick and they need help, but we also have somebody who's died and we have a next of kin. And it often struck me of why we didn't do a lot more early on in the system to prevent us from being in this situation. So I started after there was a school shooting and a murder suicide at one of our West Valley schools. We have a program called Speak Up, Stand Up, Save a Life. It's an annual summit. Last year we had to go virtual, but we had 10,000 applicants from 169 schools. And we try to teach all of the students the universal warning signs that one of their classmates could be in crisis. And then we try to connect them to resources that are available in the community to get them help. And one of our focuses is on mental health and removing the stigma of asking for help and trying to deal with that situation. So because you're right, the problem that I've seen in some of the most violent crimes that occur, not all, it doesn't happen in every situation, but it's a pattern in a lot of them, the issue of self-medicating. And if we can help remove the stigma of taking meds, then maybe we can try to prevent that issue that sometimes will lead to dropping out of school and homelessness. And it spirals out of control from there. So that's our focus of the big Speak Up, Stand Up, Save a Life movement. I'm excited that we're partnering with Grand Canyon University again and ASU, and we'll hold this free conference for every school and student in Arizona on February 1st. And it's also available to all parents and community members, especially because it's virtual. Anyone can sign on. And our theme this year is going to be building connections for that. But on a side note, I recently moved over to the city of Goodyear, and I've always had the dream of having this community court and implementing more of it here so we can help individuals at the misdemeanor level before their criminal conduct escalates. And so the city of Goodyear is excited and very supportive of it. And they just granted us funding. So hopefully the next year, we're going to have one of the first community courts in the West Valley up and running to deal with mental health, homelessness. And we also want to obviously deal with substance abuse and veterans issues, all of it. And be able to give that, we're still working on how that wraparound service is going to look like and what and we've got to bring in a navigator to help the defendants navigate through the system and connect them to the right resources. So we need to build that. We have a lot of work to do in the next year to try to work on a program. And thanks, Mary Lou, to all of your connections. We're probably going to use a lot of what Mesa's already doing that's successful and try to incorporate a lot of that.
That's terrific. And let me respond. You sort of triggered a few things in me. One is, this is another one of Judge Leifman's passions. We know that there are tests that you can give to young people. We know that, drug challenges, mental health challenges overwhelmingly come to people who have been abused as children. It can be sexual abuse, it can be family abuse, it can be of any number of varieties. But you can early on tell whether somebody is at higher risk of having these traumas trigger something really bad later on. And if we paid attention to that, And this is also something that Tom Insel mentioned to me early on when he was at NIMH, that we're now discovering that if you intervene early, including right after the first psychotic episode, you can have a much, much larger impact. We're starting to edge towards, I think, at least a better understanding of these things. I would also mention one other area that I haven't mentioned before that we've been deeply engaged in, and that is a partnership with a remarkable psychologist named Javier Amador. Some of you may be familiar with Javier. He wrote a book that has been translated into probably 25 languages called I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help. It was basically motivated, his whole career has been motivated by his experience with his brother, who was schizophrenic and had anosognosia, did not believe he was ill, in Tucson, actually. And he really has found a better way of communicating with people who otherwise would get antagonistic. And it's called LEAP, which stands for Listen, Empathize, Agree, and Partner. It's not as simple as it sounds, but Javier has been doing programs around the country, training people in LEAP and then training people to be trainers in this. And it's something that ought to go beyond law enforcement personnel. It ought to include teachers. It ought to include the people who are there, who are called when somebody in a classroom is acting up. And almost inevitably in those situations, what you get is an escalation. And if you can teach people to communicate better and de-escalate that conflict, it can make an enormous difference as well. And that's done through the crisis intervention training. It can also be done through other venues, including LEAP. And Javier has a nonprofit foundation now that we have partnered with to do some of these trainings around the country. We've often worked with NAMI in different places. And I'm sure nothing would please him more than to come out to Arizona, where he has strong roots.
I was just going to say, Doctor, I would love to connect offline with you. You have some great things, because we, in this big program, we also train all the teachers and parents. So it might be some really good curriculum. I think we could spread out and do a nice breakout, at least get do some brainstorming, and get some ideas from you on that, because I think that would be extremely valuable.
Yes, please do connect. And I know that Javier and his team were actually going to be doing a program in October in Denver. I think arranging one of those after we're more easily able to do in-person events. He usually will get a couple hundred people who will come to one of these. And if you're interested, I see that Jess put up his website, but you can also go to YouTube and you can see one of his trainings there. And it's he's just terrific at this. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go to another meeting, as I see some others have as well. Sure. But I'm very, very happy that Mary Lou connected with us, and I thank Jess for that connection as well. And I want very much to see Arizona, which has already done some wonderful things, thanks in significant part to all of you, continue to improve and to help people succeed in their lives and find ways to avoid these traumas and do, as Judge Leifman has been able to do, save lives and save money at the same time.
Thank you, Dr. Ornstein. And Gina, thanks for those comments. And yes, what do we train those 10,000 youth to be good debaters and leaders in civic discourse, huh?
I just will tell you that there has been nothing more heartening to us than to see some of these young people who have unlimited potential succeed. So we give out each year a Matthew Ornstein Award, not to the best debater, but to the debater who best exemplifies his values. And that includes teamwork, decency, civility, humor. and dedication. And the winner of the award in 2019, a young man named Jonathan Collins from a public high school, a Title I school in Prince George's County, Maryland, just nearby, a working class area, ended up getting the award as National Urban Debater of the Year, and is now in his sophomore year at Harvard. And the debate experience is really the springboard that got him there. He's going to end up being a scientist, but he's just one of many who managed to succeed. And in these debates, you have to learn both sides, because you don't know which side you're going to be asked to take in any individual debate. And you have to, even if it's something that you find is anathema, you have to learn what those arguments are, and it trains you better in how to deal with discourse in a divided society. The divisions aren't going to end, but we can certainly handle them better. So thank you all. And
tremendous.
goodbye.
Thank you again. A heartfelt thank you to Norman Ornstein and Jessica Berenson for being with us today. And do not forget to learn more about the Matthew Ornstein Memorial Foundation, and we'll look forward to having you spend lots more time with us in Arizona. Thank you so much. And I know you have to go, so appreciate so much you being here. All right, well, and also on the chat, you can see that you have Norm's direct email address. You have Jessica, the executive director of the Ornstein Foundation, her email address is there. And then Gina, thank you for putting in the website for Speak Up, Stand Up, and follow that for February 1st when next year's conference will take place. So we are going to, we're right on time. How do you like that? We are going to switch gears. Oh, before I go on to our next guest, I just wanted to thank Audrey Dorfman, who is our David's Hope board member, who is backing me up for this meeting in case we have any technical problems. Thank you, Audrey, for being here with us today. I know you've been here from the beginning, and I failed to recognize you earlier. So thanks for all your support for David's Hope. And we are very happy now to have another heavy hitter today with us, and that is attorney Wendy White. And I'm going to thank you, Wendy, for being here. I know I saw you were logged on, and there you go. I see you. I'm going to read a little bit about your bio, and I have sent it out, and I hope everybody appreciates the treasure that we have up there in Coconino County. And I don't know what took me so long to get you down here into our meetings, but we are so happy you're here with us. Wendy has been a public defender in Coconino County, a prosecutor for the city of Flagstaff and Coconino County, the county indigent appeals attorney, a solo practitioner, and the appointed legal defender for Coconino County. And this is important, folks. I think it's so interesting to learn this about Wendy. In 2005, Wendy was instrumental in founding the Coconino County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, one of the first in the nation. I know Wendy didn't think it was the first, but it was very early on. And she was the director and coordinator of the council for its first 4 years. As director, she was responsible for implementing numerous criminal justice system reforms, including the establishment of a mental health court, a CIT training curriculum for the Flagstaff Police Department, failure to appear demonstration projects for the Flagstaff Justice Court. In 2006, she co-founded Flagstaff Shelter Services, a nonprofit secular shelter for chronically homeless men and women. And she was presented as a Homeless Advocate of the Year award in 2008 and the Northern Arizona Pro Bono Attorney of the Year award. Wendy's taught classes at Northern Arizona University in criminal law and wrongful convictions. She has educated public defenders in Hopi traditional law, effective representation of persons with mental illness, cultural awareness, and ineffective assistance of counsel for trial attorneys. She was recently invited to be a member of a think tank hosted by the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the National Association of Public Defense, seeking to research issues regarding the delivery of indigent defense services. So welcome, Wendy. We're very honored to have you be here, and we can't wait to get to know you better and learn more about your work up there as founder of the Southwest Center for Equal Justice.
Thank you, Mary Lou. I'm not sure after you read all that when I had time to do all that, but I did. But I did. So I'm actually going to just post in the chat our website and phone number, as well as my name and my partner's name, Gary Perlmutter. So I'm gonna, hopefully this will work. So yes, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to be part of your coalition. I was happy to find you online. Your goals seem to mirror ours as well. Southwest Center for Equal Justice, which is my, well, I can't say it's my most recent endeavor, because as of last week, I also just started another nonprofit called the Community Assistive Teams of Flagstaff, which the acronym is CATS, CATS of Flagstaff. And that is yet another new nonprofit that I'm working on. Some people call me an overachiever. So what I just wanted to give you an update on what we're doing. Southwest Center for Equal Justice is the brainchild of myself and my partner, Gary Perlmutter. And we have been, as Mary Lou said, I've been a public defender in Flagstaff in Coconino County since 1986 is when I arrived here. And as those of you obviously are aware, particularly those who are actually actively engaged in the criminal justice system, we know how many people are involved in the criminal justice system who suffer from mental illness. And I became interested in, and I think devoted to, the issue of mental illness in the for people within the mental. Excuse me. I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of actually writing a huge brief right now, and I'm taking 15 minutes off from doing that. But because I've become really interested in the issues since 1986, and very aware of the issues of mental illness in the criminal justice system. One of the things I'd like to point out to you is that we do have our website, and we do have resources on our website, including the program PowerPoint presentation that I did for the Arizona Public Defenders Association on effective assistance of counsel for persons with mental illness. That is in our public defender folder or link on our website. And if you would like to use it, you're more than welcome to. It's no charge. If you want to ask questions about it, or if you'd want us to present that information at any point in time, we'd be happy to do that as well. So we started Southwest Center for Equal Justice. We started it in January of 2019. And it was a result of myself and Gary, my Perlmutter, my co-founder, having worked in the system and having realized that while we have felt that our lives have meaning assisting individuals who are involved in the criminal justice system, we felt that our lives would have more meaning if we could actually engage in some systemic change and actually make some contributions to the entire system, as opposed to just individuals. And what our goal is with Southwest Center for Equal Justice is actually to effect those changes. And we're doing that because as attorneys, of course, not only do we have the ability to advocate, but we carry the big stick. And the big stick is the ability for us to go out and file a lawsuit if in fact there is conduct or systemic conduct that is unlawful, or even if we feel like maybe we can just make a change. And so just to let you know, we have actually recently filed a lawsuit against the Coconino County Jail for its practices in the dispensation of medication for persons with psychiatric disorders, because it is an issue that I have been dealing with the jail up here for many years and have been in discussions with them. And there's just been I don't know that it's a resistance to change, but perhaps there's been a inability to understand how changes could be made. And so we are actually hoping to be able to resolve the issues that we've seen without further pursuing litigation. But by kind of bringing this to the forefront and by making it an issue, we believe that we have a better chance of getting the changes that we think are necessary. And we've also actually are in the process of, I don't want to spill the beans here, but there is a city in Flagstaff, not Flagstaff itself, excuse me, a city in Arizona, not Flagstaff, that has a horrendous anti-homeless camping ordinance. It's basically an anti-sleeping ordinance. It violates the Constitution, it violates case law, and we are in the process of preparing that complaint to file as a class action against that city, whose name will be later disclosed once we file it. So much of homelessness, as you know, so many people who are homeless have coexisting disorders. They have mental health disorders, and they often also have behavioral health addiction disorders. And so when we think about homelessness, I don't see how we can think about it without thinking about those disorders as being a part of the homelessness issues. So the next nonprofit that I have just started in conjunction with some other folks is looking at the issues of homelessness and addressing those issues and addressing an alternate response model to engage with calls for service that are currently being responded to by police, ambulance services, and fire. We're looking at providing an alternate response. Yes, so interesting. I see that there's, and you know what, instead of talking, maybe I should just ask if you have questions, because I'd be happy to answer those. We do address other issues besides mental illness. We are, however, all of these issues I think are interrelated in many ways. One of the other issues that we are looking at, of course, are racial bias or racial prejudice in the criminal justice system. We're looking at over-incarceration, which is clearly contributed to by the over-incarceration of persons with mental illness. We're looking at poverty issues, fines and fees issues, which again can be a component of both over-incarceration and can be driven by persons who have mental health and behavioral health disorders. So there's a lot of other things that we're looking at. We see it as being a multifaceted issue. Mental health is one of those issues, but all of these things contribute to this overutilization of the criminal justice system. So I see, if you'd like, I'd be happy to take questions or answer questions. I don't have anyone sitting here with me to read these chats for me, so I kind of have to look at it myself. Or maybe Mary Lou, maybe you can.
Well, Wendy, why don't we have a couple of questions, and I have one also. I don't want to forget, so I'm going to throw it out there. You don't need to answer it now. I would like to know what you do in the way of legislative advocacy, because I'd like to sit behind you while you do it. I'm not a leader in that area.
Right. Well, I will say that currently we haven't done anything with legislative advocacy directly at this point in time. We are a new organization. Gary actually has been effective in getting some legislation done while he was the legal defender for Coconino County. So he might be able to address that better, and I can ask him or have you contact him to discuss that. We are looking at advocacy locally though, because in many ways, local jurisdictions have almost a greater impact on issues than the state legislature does. Sorry about that. So yeah, I can't really, we haven't really done a whole lot on that yet, Mary Lou.
I bet you will, but that's just my guess. Let me, Melissa Knight, Melissa is a wonderful partner of the coalition and a probation officer in Pinal County. Melissa, do you want to go ahead and just ask your question to Wendy?
Sure. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing, Wendy. We absolutely need folks who know how to navigate the system to help us make changes in the system. It's called different things in different areas. In our county, it's called Early Disposition Court. I see from Deanna, it's called Early Resolution Court in her area. And it's some call it rocket docket. Basically, the intent was to help cut down on some of the number of continuances that were happening and that were placing sentencings years sometimes away from the actual charge itself. However, unfortunately, what has happened, as is so often the case, we've gone from one extreme all the way to the other. And now we have some folks who can be going from arraignment through change of plea all the way to sentencing in a single day. And they come to our office with no idea what just happened, no idea what they've agreed to in their plea agreement, no idea what comes next. In some cases, these are folks who have mental health involvement, and in some cases not. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody anywhere looking at this process to see what changes can and should be made.
You know, I mean, I am familiar with early disposition courts, and I totally agree with you that people walk out of there feeling dazed. They just got run over by the bus. They don't know what happened. And it's a huge issue, I think, but I don't know of anyone specifically looking at early disposition courts. I would honestly, as a defense attorney, I would say that it's not just early disposition courts that create the dazed look and the confused look that people have. The reality is that you have a system that's filled with, the power side of the system is filled with people who are highly educated, highly knowledgeable about language, capable of understanding statutes, who end up just taking for granted that defendants understand what they're talking about. And unfortunately, my experience is that, well, it's not my experience. The reality is that, heck, half the time lawyers and judges don't know what the meaning of a statute is. And yet we're expecting clients who have little education, perhaps, may have difficulty with the English language, may just have difficulty with language at all. And we're expecting them to understand their rights and what the meanings of these, of the quote unquote deals that they just got are, or what the terms are. So yeah, I think it's across the board. I think I do in the trainings that I do for the APDA and for other lawyers, one of the things I tell lawyers, I try to explain to them, don't use legalese. Explain things in a manner that's understandable without talking down to somebody. Use plain English. And the other thing I tell them is, don't use your suit, your briefcase, or your desk as a way to put up a barrier between yourself and your client and express that you're better than they are. We're all just people, and we need to understand each other. And so I do try to stress communication skills for lawyers. And if you take a look at the PowerPoint I put together on effectively representing people with mental illness, you might see in there that I do have some communication tips for people.
And that is on the website. I know.
Yes, and that's on the website. It's under the public defender resources link on the website.
Yes, great resource. And Deanna Ballinger, Hope Incorporated now. Did you want to, you had an interesting question there. Do you want to jump in on this?
Oh, I was so glad that Melissa brought up the topic of the early disposition court, because it's it's been a concern in our area since they implemented that a number of years ago. And we see people just sort of like railroaded and pushed through this process, again, without really comprehending and maybe not even fully understanding what their rights are in this. And I have wondered if programs like these violate individuals' civil rights.
Well, so that's a good question. One of the things that I've done, actually kind of made a career of, I do what are called post-conviction relief petitions. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically once a person has been convicted, they do have a right to have the conviction reviewed. And part of what I have done a lot, it's kind of like an appeal, but in general, the post-conviction relief process only mostly operates on cases where somebody has pled guilty. And so the problem is that when I read through the transcripts, it's obvious to me that the individual does not understand what their rights are. I mean, who would? Again, you know, the judge is explaining things in language that only someone with a law degree would understand, and the attorneys often are not able to explain it any better. But when it comes down to legal rights and whether or not the person's legal rights have been violated, it's virtually impossible to, on an individual basis, it's virtually impossible to get that conviction overturned. I have been successful on occasion, but you have to be able to show, for example, that the individual can't read at all. And yet they signed saying, I read this document. So there's just, yes, do I think that it violates rights? I do. I think the process is oppressive. I think the process is designed for only people who understand the law to figure out. And I think that, but I do have to say also that a lot of the burden and responsibility rests with the defense attorneys who are representing the client, because they're the ones that actually need to be able to explain the process to the client. And that's also one of our areas of interest, is in ensuring that individuals do have adequate counsel.
Thank you, Deanna, and thanks, Wendy. An interesting happening that's been happening, I mean, well-intentioned, and we see it across the state, the movement to make the Rule 11 process shorter is very dubious. And when you look at the final results, you know, having only one evaluator rather than two, all sorts of things that have been done in the different regions and city courts that are handling misdemeanor courts that are trying to, I know Judge Leifman in his work in Miami has really tried to skip a lot of the process of time consuming, keeping people in jail and sweeping people through. But it is very frightening when you change laws before you really have the input from all sides of the field. And so as advocates, that's what, you know, we encourage people to follow closely what's being done in their region. And sometimes very well-meaning changes backfire. And so, you know, we see that the knee-jerk responses. So we certainly have been happy to see so much progress and attention to the issue of people with mental illness that are in jail. But at the same time, getting the right stakeholders at the table to discuss. It seems like the only real substantive discussions take place when they're trying to pass legislation. Like no one's talking about it before they get there, right?
Yep.
It's so frustrating.
Yep.
Melissa, do you have another question? I know, Wendy, you said you don't have too much longer probably to stay with us. You want to take one more? I think Melissa wanted to elaborate a little bit more on her concern out there in Pinal County. Is that okay?
Sure. Absolutely. And just as a follow-up on that, a lot of legislation in the criminal justice system, and I would say, in fact, most of it is advanced by the Arizona, what is it, APAC? It's the Arizona Prosecuting Attorneys Council. And so there's very little legislation that is proposed in the criminal justice arena by public defenders. And I would say basically almost all legislation is advanced from the prosecutorial perspective.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Melissa, you did not have something new, did you? I apologize. Okay.
I didn't. I can offer one thing on the positive side. Wendy mentioned that one of the things her organization is looking at is fines. In Pinal County, we are working to establish a process to implement ARS 13824, which has to do with, and 825, which has to do with mitigating fines that were implemented at sentencing and or offering community service as an alternative to paying fines in the Superior Court. That's been in existence in limited jurisdiction courts for a long time, but we didn't have it in Superior Court. And so my chief's goal is to make sure that all probationers who lack the means to pay their fines will come off of probation without a criminal restitution order. Now, those who have the means, you know, they still have some responsibilities, but.
Yeah, that sounds good. Actually, just an interesting update up here in Coconino County, we have I don't want to point fingers too much, but I guess it's a public record now. So the Page Justice Court has been known to keep jurisdiction over persons in misdemeanor situations or have been convicted of a misdemeanor, to keep jurisdiction over that person for non-payment of fines for decades. Last year, I actually had to, 2 years in a row, I had to file an action to have the court close a case in which the individual was 15 years old. The person had been convicted when they were 26 of driving on a suspended license. And the court had kept the case open for 15 years, hauling him into court every year and actually having him arrested for non-payment of a fine for 15 years. He was under the jurisdiction of the court longer than he could have been had he been placed on probation. And interestingly, just this week, I had gotten contacted by another attorney about some cases and sent that off to the presiding judge here. And just this week, the presiding judge of the Superior Court of Coconino County has now issued an order taking over the Page Justice Court and assigning the judge to administrative duties only. So one of the things that we see actually is one of the issues I have particularly, is in misdemeanor courts, is that there are no attorneys representing people in misdemeanor courts unless they've been, particularly in rural courts. In some of the bigger cities, Maricopa County, misdemeanors may get attorneys appointed, but in a lot of the rural counties, they just don't, unless they're absolutely required to by the Constitution. And some of you might not know that the Constitution does not require the appointment of counsel unless an individual is actually facing the possibility of some kind of incarceration term. So all of these cases are running, or many of these cases are run through the court system without a defense attorney, sometimes in some jurisdictions without even having a prosecutor present, and the judge is acting as prosecutor, judge, jury, and defense attorney simultaneously. And it's just unsupportable, unsustainable, in my mind, absolutely wrong situation. And I think it contributes to over-incarceration. It contributes to the disruption of people's lives. It contributes to vicious cycles. And oftentimes it's imposed upon people who have mental health and poverty and behavioral issues. And to the extent that we can get any legislation passed, I would really like to get legislation passed that expands the rights of persons to counsel in misdemeanor courts.
Thank you, Wendy. Very interesting. And people don't realize what's going on unless it's happening to them most of the time or one of their family members. So it's so easy to be under the radar with these massive systemic problems. I'm curious if anyone out in, I don't know if we have any, well, before we go, Wendy, I know people are excited to get to know you and know about the center. Can you help us understand a little bit? I know that my understanding is that the cases that you do take on are more systemic based cases. So it kind of reminds me of the Arizona Center for Disability Law, where you could come to them with a case and they're not going to be able to represent you individually, but if they have enough cases with similar situation, they might consider it as a larger part of a larger action. Is that sort of how your center works?
Yes and no. So we have taken on cases for individuals. In fact, we picked up or took on a misdemeanor case down in Chandler because we were called by an attorney, the individual who had been arrested for a minor misdemeanor, but he was severely mentally disabled. And so because he was not entitled to an attorney, we were asked if we might take it on pro bono. So we took that case on for him. The couple of cases that led to the action against the Page Justice Court, those were actually, the ones that we took on were actually individual cases for two individual people. So it depends on whether we can take on or would take on individual cases if we think that there's either a chance that we can use that case to still have impact, or if that case is going to provide a basis for a more systemic challenge. So we won't take on just any old case. We've done that. We've been there. We've represented individuals. So that's really not where we're going. But what we want to see in the case is that there is some fairly clear violation of a civil right or constitutional violation in that case. We are looking, however, to do more systemic challenges. The two cases I mentioned earlier, one against the county jail and one against the unnamed city for their anti-homeless ordinance, those are both being filed as class actions. I don't know if that explained it.
Yes, it does. And I'm trying to remember now, do you send out notices of what's going on, or what's the best way to follow your work there at the center?
At the moment, because it's just me and Gary, we've got no staff. So at the moment, the website is probably the best way. I try to get on Facebook. We do have a Facebook page and make some give out a little news there. But until we have somebody who can to come in and actually do some of that for us, if you want to know what's going on, feel free to give us a call.
Okay.
But you can also follow our website. But
okay, and it's funny, but in our coalition, we've accomplished so much through our partnerships with the different stakeholders, and so when when I got a grasp of the work you're doing there, you get a little frightened, because there's so many lawsuits going on, but there's so many needed lawsuits going on. And sometimes it's just joyful to see, gee, finally, this is getting some attention. At the same time, we want to continue to build our partnerships, as I'm sure you do as well. But it reminds me of, one of the main founders of our coalition was Dr. Dawn Noggle, who was the mental health director of the Maricopa County Jail. And she always talked to us about the Graves lawsuit, that was going on for 20 or 30, I don't know, 30 years at the Maricopa County Jail. And I remember her teaching us that lawsuits can be a very good thing. And so it's funny because as the director of the jail, she was welcoming the oversight. So I'm just wondering, do you feel supported by entities around the state that you're having to confront or cross paths with?
I would say no. I would say not in general. In general, I think she might be a unique person, and there may be people within the system that would welcome the lawsuit, but for the most part, as soon as you serve a complaint, it's like the walls go up. And so no, there is not a whole lot of a receptiveness to change that way. Our goal is to actually affect change without lawsuits, in addition to with lawsuits. The lawsuit, as I see it, is the big stick that we're able to carry around as lawyers, is that we have the big stick. It's like if we can't achieve systemic results, if there is so much intransigence, and in fact, there's a viable basis for a lawsuit, because just because we want change doesn't mean something's illegal. And so there has to be a viable legal basis for, in order to bring a lawsuit. But if we can't get change through non-legal methods, and if there is a real violation of law going on, then the lawsuit and the big stick comes out.
Well, and I appreciate hearing that one of your goals is to settle things, without the lawsuit. And it brings to mind as a layperson, when I was studying this years ago, trying to figure out how things got so messed up, learning about the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission and the representation there. And when you read their charter, they're supposed to represent all stakeholders that are involved in the justice system, which would mean defendants, defense attorneys. And I know years back, defense attorneys couldn't get on the commission. How does that look today? Are you involved in that in any way, or looking at what's going on there?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same today. There's not a whole lot of representation. I think there might be one defense attorney on the commission, but it's still, as I said, it's a rather unique situation. I don't know if it's unique. Maybe it happens in other states. In Arizona, and maybe in most states, the district or county attorneys, or in other states they're called district attorneys, but prosecutors are generally elected officials, whereas defense attorneys and the public defender are appointed. And so the ability, there's somewhat of a conflict of interest in the system inherently, again, an issue that we are looking at. And the conflict is in that if a public defender is an appointed person, then they can be unappointed at any time. So if the powers that be, the county, doesn't like what the public defender is doing, doesn't like the public defender making waves, doesn't like the public defender pursuing legislation changes or anything, the public defender can't. But the prosecutors are immune from that because they are elected officials, and therefore they can force or make legislative changes that public defenders simply do not have the power to do. So it's just it's a power imbalance between prosecution and public defense.
Wow. Well, thank you for laying that out like that. And that's a critical issue that affects everything. Mm-hmm. So seems like a point that we need to keep trying to shine the light on.
And one of the things that we do have advantage, or one advantage that we have as Southwest Center for Equal Justice, is that we aren't funded by anyone. We're basically at the moment volunteering our services. So we're not beholden to anybody. And we do have the ability, without fear of repercussions to our personal stakeholders, we do have the ability to advocate for legislation and advocate for change without worry about getting fired because, as we were previously as legal defenders, we were in a position where, well, you got to be real careful about what you say and what you propose because you might not have a job tomorrow.
Wow. Well, that's very helpful. I appreciate so much, Wendy, you sharing with us today. And perhaps sometime in the future, when some of your cases slow down, we can have you back for a more lengthy discussion.
I would love to be here, and I would love to have anyone that wants to please contact me. We are actually looking for board members for our organization still. We are a Arizona organization, not just a Coconino County organization. And so we are looking for board members, maybe from other areas within the state. If you're interested in being on our board, we have 5 good board members now, but please contact me because we'd love to hear from you.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll be sure to help get that word out as well.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
I know many people would be honored. So thanks again. Don't forget the Southwest Center for Equal Justice operating, and Wendy and Gary at the helm, I think are going to have a bright future and hopefully be able to, what I'm hoping is that the civic dialogue will be brought to a reasonable point where we're able to discuss all these issues and have some sensible common sense reforms before we're voting on the bills down at the legislature. Have all sides agreeing. Wouldn't that be something?
It would be nice.
All right.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to leave. I do have this huge brief that I had to get
sure.
done by 11:59 tonight. So,
oh man, good luck to you.
Electronic filing has made my procrastination even worse.
Best of success. Thanks for jumping in with us.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye now. And we're ready to close the meeting. Thanks to everyone for hanging in with us. Unless anyone has any last minute comments, again, I want to thank Audrey Dorfman for being here behind the scenes to back up the meeting here. As you all have picked up, we're going through some changes and we'll probably continue to do that, but we'll keep you all posted with any new developments through our email. And please continue to refer people that need help navigating the justice system to us, and we'll be glad to take their call. So are there any last minute comments that anybody just wants to share, or anything going on that they need to tell us about? And thanks to NAMI Arizona for the continued support as well through many years now. So, all right, I guess we will say goodbye. I hope you all enjoyed it. This was all recorded, so we can go back and listen again. And I think there was a lot to think about that got seeded into our heads today. So have a good rest of your day. Stay safe. And as Norm mentioned earlier, get vaccinated and keep your mask at hand.
Thanks, right. Mary Lou.
Thank you. Thanks, Audrey. Bye now.
That's it. My one.